It's rare to find a podcast that can actually change your life. But when the show's called Life Kit, that's kind of the whole point. I'm Mariel Segarra. 3 times a week on the Life Kit podcast, we guide you through a topic we could all use help with, from personal development to healthy living to managing your dinero, with takeaways so you can start living what you learn right away. Escucha el Life Kit podcast from NPR.
Hi, I'm Joshua McNichols, host of KUOW's podcast, Booming. Join me and the Big Dig podcast for a conversation about the decisions shaping our highways, from removing the Alaskan Way Viaduct to the future of I-5 and Highway 99. That's Monday, October 27th at 7 p.m. at the Central Library in downtown Seattle. RSVP for this free event at kuow.org/events. See you there.
KUOW live events are sponsored by Finney Ridge Painting.
Have you ever found it impossible to find the unsubscribe button?
We're so sorry to see you go. But wait a second. If you stay, we'll give you 1 month's free.
Maybe you've accidentally opted in to accepting all cookies.
Are you canceling because it's too expensive? Are you poor? Was the UI too hard for you to understand, you little dum-dum?
Then you may have fallen for a dark pattern.
Real quick, are you sure? Are you sure you want to leave? You're sure?
These dark patterns are all over the internet.
And they're at the heart of a lawsuit brought by the federal government, essentially accusing Amazon of defrauding millions of shoppers. The trial kicked off in Seattle this week, and the outcome could change how companies sell us stuff online. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols, and this is Booming, a podcast about the economic forces shaping our lives here in the Pacific Northwest.
Today, what are dark patterns, and how could a crackdown on them change how we experience the internet? That's coming up.
You applied first for the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, is that correct?
Yes.
But you were unsuccessful?
Obviously.
So, Monica, what exactly is a dark pattern?
Well, it's sometimes called a deceptive pattern or manipulative design. It's when a website has features that are intentionally designed to get you to do something that you would not otherwise do. The federal government says this is a type of fraud, and it's trying to get rid of it.
Yeah, this is why the FTC first brought the lawsuit against Amazon in 2023. If the FTC wins, it could send a message that ends up changing online shopping for everyone. I mean, companies could feel compelled to be more transparent online.
Right. The FTC claims Amazon used dark patterns to trick millions of users into subscribing to Prime without meaning to. And the complaint says Amazon created this long, difficult process full of roadblocks that stopped Prime members from unsubscribing. My favorite detail about this case is the code name that Amazon allegedly gave that process, the Iliad flow.
Yes, Iliad, like the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yep. So we should note that Amazon didn't respond directly to my questions about the name. Instead, they pointed to a trial brief that says, hey, there are at least 40 different ways to get to the cancellation page, and once you're there, unsubscribing only takes a few seconds. That being said, it's hard to not get the impression from the name that somebody at Amazon wanted unsubscribing from Prime to be like laying siege to Troy for 10 years.
Yes. Yeah, the Iliad is also just a really long book to get through, at least if you're reading it in high school.
That's true. The reading is the crucible.
Okay, so back to dark patterns. How does the FTC say Amazon used them?
Well, one example in the complaint is this page that would pop up when shoppers tried to buy something on Amazon. Before checking out, according to the complaint, they would see this page with a big yellow button that says "Get free 2-day shipping." And then next to it, there's this smaller option in blue, not in a button, that says, "No thanks, I do not want fast free shipping." The language, the colors used, the whole design is trying to get you to click on that yes button. And the FTC claims that Amazon didn't make it clear when you did that you were also signing up for a recurring Prime subscription. Using this kind of language and design is an example of a dark pattern. I asked Amazon about this, and again, they pointed to that trial brief that said enrolling in Prime always requires affirmative consent. But the FTC says that button caused a lot of people to subscribe to Prime without realizing it when they were just trying to check out.
Yeah, I could see how that would happen.
Totally. Just the other morning, I was getting my kids ready for daycare. I got a notification that my youngest was out of diapers. Meanwhile, I'm making breakfast and getting Slack messages. So, like all parents of young kids, I go on Amazon, order a new pack of diapers. A million other things are happening. I would have clicked on anything to speed that process up.
Yes, I have been in the same situation. Like my chicken's water broke and I had to get a new one immediately.
Yeah, you're never like sitting there reading every single thing on the page. You just click the yellow button.
Yeah, make it happen.
The term dark patterns was first coined by Harry Brignull. He's a user experience designer and a psychologist in the UK. He went on to write a book about it, and he's also got his own nonprofit advocating against this type of design. I caught up with Harry to learn more about dark patterns. He couldn't talk directly about the Amazon trial because he is often an expert witness in similar cases, but he did help me understand how manipulative design affects us in our everyday lives. So here's our conversation. Hi, Harry. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So where did this idea of dark patterns, sometimes called deceptive patterns or manipulative design, come from?
Well, let me take you back through the last few decades and talk to it as a sort of historical chronology. If you think back to the 1990s, a lot of technology products in those days were really confusing to use. So if you're Generation X or like me or a bit older, you'll remember that, say, setting the time and date on your VHS machine was so difficult, and programming it to record a show was even harder, and fax machines were a nightmare as well. So you needed the manual and everything was kind of hard to use.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
And I'm a PC.
Ready to get started?
Well, not quite. First, I got to download those new drivers, and I got to erase the trial software that came on my hard drive.
Sweet.
And then in the early 2000s, there was this big push to make tech easier to use.
You know, it sounds like you have a lot of stuff to do before you do any stuff, so I'm just going to get started because I'm kind of excited. Let me know when you're ready.
So businesses that had easy-to-use products were more likely to see it succeed than those that didn't.
Actually, the rest of me's in some other boxes, so I'll meet up with you later.
So they hired researchers, which is kind of where my career started. People like me who had academic qualifications in psychology or similar fields. And it was our job to observe normal people in a lab doing stuff like shopping online. And then we'd find out where they got stuck and then we'd work out how to fix it. But as time went on, ease of use kind of became a hygiene factor. It became normal. It wasn't a business advantage anymore because everyone was doing it. And the framing of what researchers do changed a bit, and it shifted into persuasion, and that's where it all gets a bit murky. So instead of businesses asking, how can we make our stuff easy to use, it became, how can we influence consumers and to behave in certain ways that help us make money. So that's kind of where the whole idea came from. Back in 2010, I wrote a talk on this topic, and I made up this term, dark patterns, to describe these manipulative and deceptive design practices. And it was meant to be kind of a funny name and a bit insulting, like Star Wars. Don't join the dark side sort of thing. So I was trying to shame and discourage businesses from doing this sort of stuff.
It always makes me think of the dark arts in Harry Potter.
Yeah, Harry Potter is another inspiration. Yeah, exactly. So it was just meant to be this kind of fun name, and the name kind of stuck, and everyone uses the term nowadays, which is kind of surprising for me because it was just meant to be a little like a fun thing for a talk. So lots of people started sending me examples, and I started campaigning against it, and I was getting encouraged to do more and more of this work. But the problem was also getting worse and worse at the same time. So over the years, we were seeing more and more of these manipulative and deceptive practices happening online. And then we started seeing regulators and legislators paying attention to it. We've got new laws in the EU that uses this terminology and tries to prevent this stuff from happening. So it's all starting to change a bit. And that's kind of where we are today. We're seeing more legal action, but we're also seeing this stuff being quite common. Deceptive design is all still happening everywhere.
What are some examples of dark patterns that we encounter on a daily basis without realizing it?
So, broadly speaking, there are two main types of manipulative and deceptive design. You've got the type where the business wants the user to do something. They're trying to encourage them, influence them into taking an action. And then the other type is where the business wants to stop them from doing something. And that's what we call obstruction. For example, subscriptions are a really big deal in the internet economy. Like, we've got subscriptions everywhere now, even in places where it doesn't seem to sort of naturally fit. Like, some car manufacturers make you buy a subscription to unlock features that are built into your car, like faster acceleration or heated seats. And, it's just everywhere. So, of course, once you're subscribed, the last thing the business wants is for you to cancel your subscription, and they'll lose that recurring revenue. So, what do? If a customer wants to cancel, instead of making things fast and easy, they can just make it slow and difficult. I mean, let's say you're trying to cancel a subscription and the process goes on and on and on. The longer it takes, the more likely you are to be interrupted. Maybe your phone rings, maybe your baby wakes up and starts crying, or maybe your work break is over and you have to go back to work. And at that point, you might say to yourself, well, I'll come back to this later. And then that later becomes a month later or 2 months later, and their business then gets that extra month or two of revenue. And if they've got millions of customers, then it translates into serious money.
Is there one that you've come across that really stands out in your memory as egregious? You don't have to tell on the company, but I'm just wondering if you could describe it.
I mean, one thing you do see quite often and always bothers me is the default effect. It's where there's something that's pre-selected for you. So maybe it's a checkbox or a set of radio buttons that are pre-selected, or something that's been bundled into a choice. So it isn't obvious to you that you can opt out of it. And it's designed in a manner so you just click through the steps and end up buying something extra or signing up to something extra that you didn't intend. So that's the default effect bias. It's called a cognitive bias. It's a common mistake that all humans make. We always tend to taken in by the default effect. And now I've mentioned it to you, you're going to start seeing it everywhere.
I've heard you talk about this idea of resource depletion, which honestly makes me think more about a war of attrition and less about a website where I go to buy diapers. What does it mean in the context of this conversation?
Well, I mean, the simple fact is that we all have a limited amount of time, in a day or even in our lives, right? We're busy, we have all various obligations like working, we have to sleep. So the amount of spare time we have is fairly limited. So if a business doesn't want you to do something, they can just take advantage of that and just chip away at the amount of time you have until you run out. I mean, let's think about an imaginary business so I can kind of make that a bit more specific. Let's say that I'm a consumer and I've signed up to a coffee bean subscription. So I'm getting a new bag of coffee beans every couple of weeks. But then one day I find it's all a bit too much and I just want to cancel. So how could the resource depletion work? There's so many different ways they can go about it. I mean, the first thing I need to do is sign in, and then I need to find the right page, which is going to take time and effort. And if they've designed it in some ways, it's going to take longer and it's going to be harder than other ways. Let's think about the navigation, that the labels on the page. Are things labeled in a manner that makes sense to most consumers, or is the language ambiguous? Because if it's confusing, then maybe a percentage of people will just give up at that point and plan to try again later. So there's a source of profit right there in that wording choice. And then when the user, when I get to the account management page, what does that page look like? Is the option to initiate the cancellation prominent enough? If it's like small grey text in the corner somewhere, maybe it's not clear and conspicuous. And again, this is another point where a percentage of people might just give up. It's another source of profit. And then if I do manage to find and click on that button, what are the next steps? Am I forced to now tell the business the reason I'm cancelling? Do they try and plead with me? Do they try and talk me out of it? And how hard is it to get through those steps? For example, they might design one of the steps to look like I've finished, when in fact I haven't, and there's another button to click. And that would be quite clever because I might think, I'm done, and I'll turn off my computer at that point, when in fact I'm still subscribed. So there are lots of different kind of techniques you can use that chip away at people's ability to complete a task. And if you think about it, if a percentage of people give up at each step, the percentages compound together. If you've got 10 steps and 10% of people give up at each step, then by the end of it, most people have given up. And another kind of key point is the business doesn't have to be really extreme in what they're doing. It can be quite subtle. Like just by making cancellation a bit more difficult, they can make a bit more money. And if they're clever, they might do it in a subtle way that doesn't draw too much attention to it.
In some ways, this seems like something that predates the internet. I think about that episode of Friends where they're trying to cancel their gym membership, and there are just so many real-world hurdles that they have to clear to be able to do that.
I want to quit the gym.
Okay. Dave in the membership office handles quitters.
This is what businesses do. And dealing with that is just kind of part of being a savvy consumer. So how are dark patterns different than any other business tactic?
Yeah, I mean, it's not new, but what the internet has enabled businesses to do is to industrialize their approach to it. So it's very easy to automate the series of steps, design that series of steps, and then they can test different versions of them and see which one makes more money. Because everything gets measured nowadays. Businesses can then have, you can imagine spreadsheets or PowerPoint presentations with charts in saying this design works better than that one and we make this much more money. Now, it's very hard to argue against that sort of stuff and say, hang on, that's not actually a very fair way of doing it. If you're an exec in that meeting room, it's hard to argue against making more money. So dark patterns, a lot of the sort of underlying persuasive and deceptive techniques aren't new. Humans have been doing that stuff for ages, but the internet has transformed the ease with which we can deploy this stuff and the ease with which we can measure it and prove that it works. So it's the fact that we can now run these sort of psychology experiments all the time. And it's really, when I was an undergraduate in the 90s, if I wanted to run a psychology experiment, it would involve about 20 people, and I'd have to go through an ethics committee, and the experiment would take weeks, if not months, to kind of set up and run. And nowadays, if you're working in a big business, you can run an A/B test, a type of experiment, in a few days, and it could involve millions of people. It's psychology experiments at a scale that humanity has never achieved before. So that's kind of what's different. That's what we're looking at these days.
It's kind of a chilling thought. What's at stake for everyday consumers like you and me when it comes to dark patterns, and what could change if the government cracks down on them?
If you're a consumer who gets taken in by some sort of deceptive or manipulative design, you may find you've been taken in by a contract that you didn't intend to sign. Maybe you clicked something and you didn't realize it contained a contractual obligation. That's quite a big deal, isn't it? When you signed a contract, it might mean that you have certain rights taken away from you, agreeing to certain things, or it might be financial loss. That's a very common one that occurs in legal cases, as you can imagine. Then there's other more subtle things like time loss, frustration, sort of emotional turmoil, and that sort of thing. There's also the idea of different consumers being affected by this sort of stuff. So if you think about the different groups in society, some people will be affected by it more than others. If you've got lots of spare time, so if you're wealthy and you don't have to work very much, having to go and you spend 5 minutes working out how to do something on a website, it's no big deal, right? But if you are not wealthy, if you have to work multiple jobs in order to make a living, then you don't have the time. Or if you're caring for a child, or if you're a carer for a sick person, then you just don't have the time to go and deal with this stuff. And then, of course, there's also the question of businesses, right? Businesses actually can suffer from other businesses doing that stuff. So if we go back to our kind of coffee example, if there's another coffee subscription business that does better beans or is cheaper or is faster, and I'm thinking of switching to them, but I'm struggling to unsubscribe so I can switch, then that's unfair to this other business. So it's bad for the marketplace. So having good regulations in place is not just a businesses versus consumer thing. It's all about businesses operating well together to create a marketplace where different businesses can thrive and you don't end up with monopolies.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of deceptive design as an anti-competitive thing. How likely is pressure from the government in the form of regulations or lawsuits to change these practices?
If we're talking about legislation and regulation, we are already seeing meaningful change happening, right? It's just this stuff happens slowly. I'm not a legal scholar, so there's not a great deal I can say about the technical details of how things are changing. But I'm a designer and a researcher myself, so I do have some opinions about what designers and researchers should be doing and how what I think progress we can make from my industry into the future of legislation. In my opinion, designers and researchers, like people like me, not enough of us are just getting involved in this discussion. We have various professional associations that represent us as designers and researchers, but they're not very active on the topic. For example, we don't have a set of standards of design practices that are agreed on as prohibited, for example. We don't get involved in consultations about laws and regulations and stuff. And other industries are way ahead of us. You think about cars, for example. If you buy a car, there are safety standards that were originally voluntarily defined by the industry. If you think about kids' toys, if you buy chocolate, you might look for the fair trade label. These are things that are not legal requirements. They're industries that are trying to reduce the harms that they cause. So I think we just need a better connection between the design industry and governance. And you should note that I'm actually saying design and not tech, because the tech industry already has lobbyists. But what I'm saying is we need a coherent voice and representation at scale, because we have a lot of opinions about what should and shouldn't be done, but it's just not presented coherently outwardly to the rest of the universe, if you see what I mean. So the designers and researchers need to step up and get involved in the conversation.
Well, Dr. Harry Brignull, thank you for bringing us this conversation. It was really fascinating.
Thank you very much.
On the latest Sound Politics, Charlie Kirk's murder still has many in Washington state reeling.
And nationally, it's raised huge questions about violence, free speech, and where our country is headed if we can't disagree peacefully, especially considering polling that shows a small but growing number of Americans believe political violence can be justified.
We're going to talk about all that on the show with local conservative commentator Brandy Cruz on Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.
Monica, I found myself nodding a lot during that interview because he named so many things that I've noticed but never heard called out like that.
Yeah, once you start to look for this type of design, you see it everywhere.
Yeah, I'm thinking of when my sister tried to cancel my parents' home security service after we sold their house for them. And the hoops that she had to jump through just drove her to tears.
It's so frustrating sometimes.
Yeah. And as for this Amazon trial, Monica, you and I will both be covering it as it unfolds over the next few weeks. It's supposed to wrap up by the end of October, and we'll do another episode when that happens. But in the meantime, what do you think could be the outcome of this?
Well, I think that the FTC's goal is to make an example out of Amazon, and that will hopefully discourage other companies from using dark patterns. It's hard to say exactly how it will play out, but there's a potential scenario where the penalties against Amazon are really big and it has kind of a chilling effect and encourages other online sellers to be a little bit more transparent with their customers.
Mm-hmm.
They are hoping to set this standard that manipulative design falls under their authority to regulate fraud. But if Amazon wins, then I think it's probably just going to feel like free license for businesses to continue operating this way.
Yeah. Status quo continues.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. That's it for Booming. Thanks so much for listening.
And we have an ask for you. Has there been a moment where you have encountered something that you were pretty sure was written by AI in a place that you didn't expect to? If so, we want to hear from you. Give us a call and leave us a voicemail at 206-221-7158. You can also email us at booming@kuow.org, and you may be featured in an upcoming episode.
Also, special thanks to people who are donating to the show. Just one example, Trevor in Tacoma. Thank you so much for donating. We couldn't do it without listeners like you. And if you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming. Thanks.
Our producers are Lucy Suchek and Alec Cowan. Our editor is Carol Smith. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols.
And we'll see you next time.
Hey, I'm Ton Vin, host of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW. The Seahawks season is just kicking off, and so is a new menu at Lumen Field. On the latest episode of Seattle Eats, we tackle the best bites in the stadium, from Korean street food to jackfruit nachos. I'll tell you which meals stand out and how to pick the best bites from a crowded lineup. Listen to Seattle Eats on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.